works over the internet. Suppose a banking application. A banking application is an internet-based application. Simply sitting at your home, you can access a banking application. You can perform any transactions by using the banking applications without going to the bank, simply sitting at your home, simply sitting at your office. So that is an example of internet-based applications. Suppose online shopping. By sitting at your home, you can purchase anything from the market. The delivery boy will come to you and deliver the products. So this becomes possible through internet-based applications. So such type of internet-based applications can be developed by using J2EE platform. So basic fundamental definition is J2EE provides you a platform using which you can not only develop web-based applications, but also you can deploy or execute the web-based applications. Now the question is how to develop. To help you in developing web-based applications, some design patterns are suggested. Design patterns are ready-made formats, templates. They are suggested to you so that you can easily develop the web-based application as per the specifications given by a specific design pattern. So there are many design patterns. MVC is a design pattern, repository design pattern, singleton design pattern, factory design pattern. These are all different design patterns. All design patterns are readily available to you. As per your requirement, you can follow, you can implement any design pattern so that it will be easier for you to develop a web applications. So in this particular slide, two things are mentioned. One is what is the purpose of J2E? Number two is what is design pattern. To sum up, the purpose of J2EE is to develop web applications and to deploy web applications. Design pattern is readily available formats, readily available templates that you can use for easily developing a web applications. And there are many design patterns, out of which some of are specified here, MVC repository, etc. Then next important concept is web server and web container. Before designing, before developing a web-based application, you must have some idea about web server and web container. Because deployment of the web application will be on web server. So before developing any web application, you must have basic knowledge what a web server is and what web container is. Because you will take the help of web server for execution of your web applications. So when web application is completely developed, that will be hosted by a web server. So until and unless you know what a web server is, So the development of web application, the process of developing the web applications will not be completed. So before going into the development process, we must know what a web server and what a web container is. In a internet-based application, always there is a communication. Suppose you want to access your bank account. Your bank has a web application that is hosted over the internet. You access the bank's web application. Using bank's web application, you can access your bank account for performing any transactions. So there is a communication between yourself and the web application of the bank. So basically, in any web application, a strong communication system is established. And always the communication takes place between client and the server. So these are the two basic components of any web application. There must be a client and there must be a server. The server hosts the web application. The bank has a server. The server of the bank hosts the web application of that particular bank. You are at the client side. Customers are at the client side. So fundamentally, what is a server and what is a client? So server is a software that is loaded into bank's computer. So web server is a software. Similarly, client is also a software. Using the client, customers access the web server. Suppose you are the customer. So you must use a client software to access the bank's server. So your browser is the client. Using your computer and using a browser, suppose Google Chrome is a browser. So that browser is nothing but the client software. Using the client software, that is using the browser, you can access the bank's server, over which the bank's web application is hosted. So there are two things. Server is a software. Browser is also a software. Server software hosts the web application and browser software can be used for the purpose of communication with the web applications that is hosted over the server. These are the two concepts you must know, you must understand. So communication takes place between browser and server. Browser is otherwise known as a client. So communication takes place always between client and server. And the communication is two-way. Clients communicate with the server. Server also communicates with the client. When client communicates with the server, that process is known as request sending. Request. So as far as web application is concerned, the web application works on the basis of the principle of request response architecture. When client communicates with the server, we can say that client is sending request to the server. for doing something. When server communicates with the client, that process is response. So client sends request to the server sends back the response to the client. So this two-way communication always takes place between client and the server. For holding this communication, another entity is required, that is HTTP protocol. Protocol is the communication carrier that carries the request from the client to the server, that carries the response from server to the client. So HTTP protocol is like a postman. It carries the request from client to the server, as well as it carries the response from server to the client. Suppose you are a customer of the bank. You want to know your account balance. So using the client, that is using the browser, you access the bank's website that is hosted on the bank's server. So using the browser, using the client, you send a request to the server for knowing your account balance. Server receives your request and it processes the request. The server accesses the bank's database. Bank's database is a very large database, huge database. The information of lakhs of customers are there into the database. The server searches the database for your particular account. What is your account number? So it searches from the database, fetches the account balance from the database, and it returns back that account balance to you. That is response. So you must send the request to know your account balance. That is communicated to the server through HTTP protocol. Server generates the account balance of your account and it sends back, returns back the account balance to you. That is also done over HTTP protocol. So HTTP protocol carries your request from client to the server. HTTP protocol also carries the response from server to the client. That's why HTTP is known as a communication protocol. HTTP stands for, you must be knowing, HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. So basic thing is, in a web-based application, there are two ends. At one end, there must be a client. At other end, there must be a server. And both the ends are connected over internet. And to communicate between client and server, the third component is necessary. That is a communication protocol. Generally, in a web-based application, we use HTTP communication protocol. Another thing is web container. Web container is a part of the web server. As I told you, web server is a software. Apache is a web server. Example, there are many such web servers. Apache is a web server. Web container is a component of the web server. What it carries? Container. Container matlab it contains something. That's why it is container. Web container. What it contains? It contains servlets. That's why it is called as a servlet engine. Web container is otherwise known as a servlet engine because it contains servlet. Now, what is a servlet? You might be knowing what a servlet is. If you are proficient in Java, then you might be knowing what a servlet is. Simply, in simpler terms, servlet is a Java program, a sophisticated Java program that is capable of handling the request coming from client side, that is capable of generating the response that is to be sent to the client, that is capable of accessing the database which is at the back end. That is the whole purpose of a servlet program. The basic technology behind client server architecture, the basic technology behind request response architecture is client sends request, server processes the request. Then server at this point of time, server takes the help of servlet program for request processing. So servlets are Java program that is contained within the web container. The responsibility of the servlet is to process the request coming from the client. Then it generates the response. That response is sent back to the client. All these things happen at the server side. So in this particular slide, there are 3-4 concepts. You must clearly understand that. Web server, that is a software. Example is Apache. That is loaded at the bank's side, bank's computer. For example, web client is another software. Commonly, that software is known as browser. That is called as client. Customers use the browser to access the software, that is web software that is hosted over the web server. Number 3, there is a protocol, and the most generalized protocol is HTTP protocol that is used for the purpose of communication between client and server. Number 4 is web container that contains a sophisticated Java program, that is servlet. And actually servlet is the heart of the web application. Servlet resides at the server side. There are 3 major responsibilities of servlets. Servlets accepts the request coming from client. Servlets processes the request. Servlets accesses the database during the request processing if required. Then it generates the response and returns back the response to the client. These are the some of the concepts. So before developing any web application, you must know all these concepts. As I told you, J2EE is a platform. And the whole to the environment for developing web applications. So J2EE platform, it is a very sophisticated platform. It is consisting of three things: a set of services, application programming interfaces, that is API. Number three is protocols. The platform is consisting of these three components. When you use this platform, J2EE platform, to develop web application, you will find that some services are available to you. You can utilize those services during the process of developing and deploying web applications. Number two, the platform is associated with a library. That library is technically known as API, application programming interfaces. API is consisting of, as I told you, servlets. How to develop servlets? Just now we discussed about servlet. So how to develop that servlet? So you must take the help of API for developing the servlets. Like servlets, there are also many components that can be contained within web container. Web container not only carries some servlets, it also carries many other components. Servlets are contained within web container. JSP is contained within web container. Java beans are contained within web container. The connectivity procedure, connectivity application are contained within web container. So many things can be contained within web container like servlets. So all these components, if you want to develop a servlet, if you want to develop beans, Java beans, if you want to develop JSP, if you want to make connectivity with the database, all these things, the required API components are available within the web container. So J2EE platform, it provides a set of services. This is number one. It provides a library, that is API, using which you can develop servlets, JSP, Java beans, etc., etc. This is number two. Number three is the J2EE platform also provides you some protocols. As I told you, protocols are necessary for communication between client and server. Without protocols, no communication is possible between client and server. One prominent example of communication protocol is HTTP. And primarily web applications works over the HTTP protocol. So these are the three major components of J2EE platform. It provides some services, it provides a library, that is API, it provides some protocols. So these are the three major constituents of J2EE platform. Some ready-made platforms are also available to you. J2EE platform, the example of J2EE platforms are Struts, Spring, Hibernate, etc. As we go further, we will discuss all these things. What is Hibernate? What is a Spring application? What is Struts? All those things we shall discuss in due course of time. But these are all J2EE platforms available for us. Using Hibernate, we can develop a web application. Using Spring, we can develop a web application. Using both in a combined way, Spring and Hibernate, we can develop web applications. So these are all readily available J2EE platforms. We can install the platforms into our computer and we can take help of these platforms to develop our web applications. And all these platforms is based on the principles of J2EE. Java Enterprise Edition specifications. So this slide tells about three things which are the constituents of J2EE platform. Set of services, a library, and some protocols. These are the major constituents of J2EE platform. Now, you must be showing the diagram on your screen. The diagram depicts the architecture. Architecture is the way in which things are arranged in the platform. Architecture is the way according to which different components of the platform are arranged. The diagram depicts how different components are arranged. Just now, we discussed what are the components available to the platform. The major components available to the platform is API, web container, web server, web container, the API, protocol, everything. How these components are arranged. So architecture specifies all those things. Basically, J2EE architecture is a layered architecture. You must be knowing what a layered architecture is. A layered architecture is consisting of multiple layers. In a networking environment, when communication takes place, that is conducted, the communication conducted over a layered architecture. I assume that you must be knowing TCP IP architecture. If you have undergone the network paper, in the details of TCP IP network model or OSI model, the most common popular model is OSI model. As per the specifications of OSI model or as per the specifications of TCP IP model, architectural model, the network communication takes place. And all these models are layered architecture. All these architectural models are based on a layered architecture. So J2E architecture is also a layered architecture that is consisting of primarily, it is consisting of three layers. Presentation layer, business layer, and database layer. Database layer is at the back end. That is not accessible to the customer. Presentation layer is at the front end. That is accessible to the customer. In between these two, that there is a business layer. That is processing layer. Everything is processed within the business layer. You are a customer of your bank. You are at the presentation layer side. You can access the presentation layer. How the customer can access the presentation layer? As the diagram depicts. Try to understand the diagram. The customer, you are the customer. The individual is the customer. So you are the customer. You want to access the bank account, your bank account. So you can access the bank account through the presentation layer. So for accessing the bank account, you must use a client, that is browser. So using a web browser, as the diagram depicts, using the web browser, you send the request to the web container. As I told you, web container contains the servlet. Servlet is the Java program that is responsible for receiving your request. You send the request that you need to know the account balance. You send the request. The request is sent through web browser, that is client. The request goes to the web container, and the request is received by the servlet that is there into the web container. The servlet receives your request and it processes the request. During request processing, it makes connectivity with the database because everything is stored into the database. Database is at the bottom layer, that is database layer. So servlet communicates with the database for a specific information. It communicates with the database. It fetches the information related to your account. So the information, the account balance is fetched from the database, relational database. It fetches the information from the database, generates the response, and that response is sent back to the client, to you. Through client, you receive that information. So you are at the client side. So you can access the platform through presentation layer. In between the presentation layer and database layer, there is a business layer. Business layer contains the servlet program that processes, that handles your request. Business layer accesses the database layer. Client doesn't have direct access to the database layer. Database layer is accessed by the business layer. So this is the mechanism. This is the architectural procedure using which communication takes place. So basically, this architecture is a layered architecture that is consisting of three broad layers: presentation layer, business layer, and database layer. And if you go deep into it, then every activity is performed, every operation is performed as per the specifications given in the 5 layers. The 3 broad layers are again subdivided into 5 layers. Client layer and web layer, these 2 sub layers are a part of the presentation layer. Business logic layer and persistence layer, these 2 are the part of the business layer, then database layer. So broadly, there are 3 layers, and 3 broad layers are again classified into some sub layers. So fundamentally, architecture, J2EE architecture is based on 5 layers. So it is a multi-layered architecture. So this is J2EE architecture. So till now, we discussed about what J2EE is and how web applications can be developed using J2EE. What are the architectural specifications of J2EE? And how communication between client and server takes place using J2EE. All these things we have already been discussed. Next part is, second part of this presentation is design patterns. As I told you in the beginning, so design patterns are readily available to you. You use any design pattern. And what design pattern you will use, that depends on your requirement. What web application you want to develop. On the basis of the requirements for your web application, you choose the design pattern. There are many design patterns. MVC is a design pattern. Repository is a design pattern. Factory is a design pattern. Singleton is a design pattern. So there are many design patterns. And all the design patterns are classified into three broad categories. Some design patterns are creational design patterns. Some design patterns are structural design patterns. And some design patterns are behavioral design patterns. And the entire application is object oriented. As Java is a object oriented language, and you are taking the help of Java to develop your web applications. So entire web application is object oriented. So creational design patterns are available for creation of objects. Suppose your web application is to use 100 objects. So you must define those objects. You must create those objects. For creation of objects, some specific design patterns are available. And those design patterns are creational design patterns. When objects are created, there is a need that objects should communicate with each other. So that is behavioral design pattern. Some patterns are there which can be used for the purpose of communication between different objects within the web application. So for communication among objects, some design patterns are available. Those design patterns are called as behavioral design patterns. And the third one is structural. Structural design pattern can be used for the purpose of defining the structure of a class from which many objects can be derived. So these are the three design patterns available. Specifically, we shall discuss now some of the important design patterns. Some of the important design patterns, and most prominent design pattern is MVC. MVC is model, view, and controller. MVC stands for model, view, controller. As I told you, this is a design pattern. It assists you in designing your web application. In the architectural diagram, please refer to the architectural diagram. In this architectural diagram, three components are there: model, view, and control. View, as the name indicates, the presentation layer represents the view part. The customer views everything through the presentation layer. Everything is presented to the customer for viewing at the presentation layer. So presentation layer represents view. Database layer is a model. The database layer that represents the model. Database model, on what model our web application is developed. Over what model our web application is developed. So database layer that represents the model. And in between view and model, the controller layer is sandwich. That is business layer. So business layer represents the controller layer. Controller layer controls everything. Controller layer contains the servlet. Controller layer contains the Java beans. Controller layer contains the enterprise beans. Controller layer contains the JSP pages. So controller layer, actually it is the web container that contains these sophisticated programs. And all these programs are meant for handling requests and generating response. So as far as this architecture is concerned, for simpler understanding, MVC is represented by this architecture. Model is database layer, view is presentation layer. In between these two, a controller layer sits. So MVC, basically, it is the most prominently used, frequently used design pattern. In this slide, all these things are written, whatever I told you just now. So M denotes only the pure application data, doesn't contain any logic. That is written in the third paragraph in this slide. Refer the third paragraph, third and fourth. M denotes only the pure application data, whereas view is responsible for presenting the data to the user. So presentation layer deals with view, database layer deals with model. Controller comes between view and model. That is the business layer, that is the business logic layer. That is responsible for accepting the request from the user, performs interaction with the database, and sends back to the view layer, sends back to the customer to the view layer, through the view layer. So this is what is MVC, model view control. This is a design pattern. And primarily the J2EE architecture is based over this design pattern, MVC. This is a UML class diagram of MVC. You must be knowing what a class diagram is, what are the classes involved, and how the classes can be used for the definition of derivation of various subjects. This is class diagram is as per the specifications of MVC design pattern. There is a view, and there is a model, and there is a controller. Here, the model is university model. The data, it contains the data. Primarily, it contains the data. View is display. Everything is displayed over view. That is university view is the display. And controller. Controller is the university controller that controls, that communicates with both the two, view and model. This is an example, MVC example. This example can be represented in terms of Java code. When you develop web application, this model can be represented in terms of Java code. When this model is perfectly represented in terms of Java code, then you will have a web application. So you need to learn the skill of representing this model into Java code. That is why from the beginning, at the beginning, I told you, you must be proficient in Java. Until and unless you know Java language, the functionalities of Java language, you cannot use those things for developing web applications. So this is the class diagram of MVC design pattern. Then second design pattern is repository. The example is MVC design pattern. The example is bank application. For example, your bank application, your online shopping application, everything is based on MVC model. Then repository design pattern. As the name indicates, repository means Repository means storehouse. So this application is primarily based on data. When the application is data centric, then this model can be implemented. Data centric application matlab entire application revolves around the data. Nowadays, IoT is used everywhere. IoT matlab Internet of Things. Primarily, the IoT applications are data centric applications. Suppose weather forecasting. In a weather forecasting application, in a particular location, a IoT is installed, IoT system is installed. There are hundreds of sensors installed within that particular location. Every second, the sensors collect the data from the environment, the temperature data from the environment. In a minute, the sensor may collect 20 data. The sensor may collect 40 data, may collect 60 data. In every second, it may collect the temperature value. So huge data are involved in this application. So application is a data-centric application. So when the application is data-centric, then this design pattern may be followed for developing the web application. The web application can be developed as per the specifications given in repository design pattern. In this design pattern, business logic is isolated from the data layer. There is no direct link between logic and data. A repository is placed in between the business logic layer and the data source. And the layer which is in between the business logic and data source is repository. So this is a design pattern that can be implemented when you want to develop a data-centric web application. Third one is singleton. Singleton design pattern. As the name indicates, singleton involves a single object. When entire application is based on a single object, no second object is there. There exists no second object. Entire application revolves around only one object. For example, when you access your bank application, the first step is you want to access your bank application. The very first step is you need to log in into the application. Login is the process of supplying your username and user ID. Password. When you perfectly correctly supplies your user ID and password, then only you can have access to the application, otherwise not. So this particular operation is conducted through an object. That is a single object. So logging object. So using this single object, you can access the web application. And this object is not only available to you only. This object is globally available. Everybody can access that. Hundreds of thousands of customers can access that particular object, login object, to access the web applications. So there are two characteristics. There must be a single object, and number two is The single object is globally accessible. So these are the two characteristics of singleton design pattern. That is what is written here. This design pattern involves a single class which is responsible to create an object. And application will ensure that only single objects gets created. It will not allow to create other objects. Number two is it provides a way to access its only object, which can be accessed directly. So global access is there with the object. Anybody can access that object. When your web application requires this facility, then you can follow this design pattern. The class diagram is given. It is a very simple mechanism to implement this design pattern. There must be one class, and that particular class is used to create a single object. Finished. So this is singleton design pattern. Another design pattern is factory design pattern. As the name indicates, factory. Factory matlab where many things are produced. That is a factory. Factory is a location where many products are produced, many things are produced. That is a factory. A car factory. Car factory produces many cars. A factory design pattern. In this particular design pattern, there is an abstract design model. In Java terminology, the abstract design model can be defined using an abstract class. You must be knowing what an abstract class is. Either an abstract class or an interface. Interface represents the abstraction of an object. From that abstraction, many real life objects can be created. In a car factory, there must be an abstract model, the architectural abstract model. From that abstract model, many physical cars can be developed, can be manufactured. So that is what is implemented through Java code. First, abstraction is created. Abstraction is created using an abstract class or using an interface. From that abstraction, other classes, real life classes can be derived. So using the principle of inheritance, real classes can be derived. The diagram shows that plan is an abstract class. The plan abstract class mentions two things: a rate of interest and calculation of bills. So this is an interface or an abstract class that carries two things. One is rate of interest, another is calculation of bill. So from this abstract class, which is plan, three classes are derived. Three real classes are derived. One is domestic plan, another is commercial plan, third one is institutional plan. So rate of interest may vary from plan to plan. There must be rate of interest that is defined in plan, which is abstract. So abstract needs to be converted into reality. So in domestic plan, the rate of interest is 10%. In commercial plan, rate of interest is 15%. In institutional plan, rate of interest is 12%. But there must be rate of interest. That rate of interest is abstract, that is defined within plan. When we derive domestic plan, we define the rate of interest, that is 10%. When we derive commercial plan, we define the rate of interest, that is 15%. When we derive institutional plan, we define rate of interest, that is 12%. And on the basis of this rate of interest, bills are calculated. Calculation of bill is done. So this is what is known as factory design pattern. So these are the three design patterns on the basis of which these are the three design patterns on the basis of which your web application is developed.
Sir, good morning. Pradeep this side.
Then we shall move to the second component. As I told you, there are three components of a web application. One component is presentation layer. Second one is model or database layer. In between presentation and database, there is the business layer. Business layer contains web container, and web container is contained with servlets. Now we shall discuss what exactly a servlet is. Try to remember what I told you about servlets and try to recall that architectural model. Servlet is a part of the web container. Web container contains servlets. Why servlets are used in a web application? Why servlets are used in a web application?
To act as a mediator between APIs, model, and view.
What it does exactly? I have already told you. Whether you are listening to me or not, that I do not know. Because I am at this side, you all are at other sides. That is the disadvantage of online classes. There is no direct communication between teacher and whether students are listening or not, teacher is not able to know that. So this is a one-sided communication. I am only speaking and speaking and speaking. Whether you are receiving or not, there is no mechanism for knowing that. Anyway, servlet is a part of the web container. Servlet is a sophisticated Java program. Servlets receives the request coming from the client. Servlet processes the request. As per the requirement, servlets communicates with the database which is at the back layer, back end. It fetches information from the database. Then it generates the response. Finally, the response is sent back to the client. So these are the operations performed by a servlet. So this is the diagram. This is the diagram. Web client. Web client, client means browser. You are the customer. You use the client to send request to the server. Client is at one side and server is at other side. Suppose your bank's application. Your bank's application is hosted over this server. The server is at the bank office. Bank maintains this server. The web application of the bank is hosted over this server. You are the customer. You are sitting at your office. You are sitting at your home. You use the client, the web browser, to send request to the server. So that request goes through HTTP protocol. All those things I have already told. So the request sent by the customer through the client goes to the server through HTTP protocol. That's why the request is known as HTTP request. Server receives the request. When server receives the request, then servlets comes into the picture. Because servlets deals with the request and response. When client sends the request to the server, it is the servlet that receives the request and deals with the request. During processing of the request, the servlet accesses the database, which is at the back end. It fetches required information from the database, processes the information, generates the response. Again, the response sends back to the client. Again, it comes to the client through HTTP protocol. That's why it is called as HTTP response. So this is the mechanism, a very simple mechanism. So HTTP is a TCP/IP based communication protocol. As per the principles laid down in TCP/IP model, all internet based application primarily follows TCP/IP model, not OSI model. OSI is a generalized model. Basically, that is a theoretical model. Practically, it is implemented through TCP/IP model. TCP/IP model is a layered architectural model. And HTTP protocol follows, implements TCP/IP communication model. That's why it is a communication protocol. HTTP is a connectionless protocol. It is a media independent protocol. It is a stateless protocol. These are the three important characteristics of HTTP protocol. Connectionless, media independent, whether it doesn't depend on the media, whether it is wired media or it is wireless media, whatever the media may be, HTTP works. So it is media independent, it is stateless. It doesn't remember the state. So it is also a connectionless protocol. Every request is independent of the other. So it is a connectionless protocol. So servlet, the role of servlet is to, as I told you, it deals with the request. And servlets are contained within the web container. And web container is a part of the middle layer of the architecture.
Sir, can I
In
record
MVC
screen?
model, we can say that it belongs to the controller part. As I told you, servlet is a Java program. It is a very sophisticated Java program. And you need to know you need to learn how to develop a servlet, how to create a servlet program. servlet program can be created by using this package javax.servlet.http servlet. This belongs to the Java API. Using this package of the Java API, API is a library. Few time back, I have already told you API is a library. So it is consisting of many packages. So this particular package can be used for the purpose of creating servlet. javax.servlet.http servlet. So now you must know how to create servlet programs. Before knowing how to create servlet programs, you must know the architecture of the servlet and the life cycle of the servlet. As I told you, the request as well as the response, both are communicated over a protocol, that is HTTP protocol. The HTTP protocol, this is the architecture, how HTTP protocol works. Servlet architecture, the simple architecture. Web browser is the client. Customer uses the web browser to send request, HTTP request. It goes to the web server. Servlets reside within the web server. So web server receives the request. When web server receives the request is sent to the servlet for processing. As the diagram depicts, the web server directs the request, HTTP request, to the servlet container. This is the web container where servlets are there. So HTTP request is handled by the servlet, and the servlet accesses the database. There is a connectivity between the servlet and the database. The servlet accesses the database for fetching information from the database. Then a request is processed by the servlet. The servlet generates the response. As the diagram indicates, the servlet container sends the response to the web server. Again, web server redirects the response to the web browser. That is HTTP response. This is the mechanism. This is how HTTP works. So this is servlet architecture, and this is life cycle. Servlet life cycle. There are 5 stages in the life cycle. A servlet lives during the life cycle. The life cycle starts with the installation of the servlet into the computer's memory. Life cycle starts there. Servlet becomes active. Servlet becomes lively when it gets into the memory. So very first step of the life cycle starts with the loading of servlet class within the computer's memory. Then a servlet object is created. When servlet class is loaded into the memory, the second step is immediately a servlet object is created. When servlet object gets created, primarily there are 3 methods into the servlet. One is init method, another is service method, third one is destroy method. I assume that you know what a Java method is and how the methods are defined within a Java program. In a servlet program, primarily there are three methods. Init method does all initialization procedures. Service method is responsible for processing of everything. Destroy method destroys the servlet at the end of its operation. So first step number one, life cycle starts with loading the servlet into the memory. Second step is when servlet class is loaded into the memory, object is created, servlet object gets created. When servlet object is created, the first step is initialization of the object. So third one is initialization is done through init method. Then processing happens. So there is a service method. The service method can be called again and again for request processing. Whatever the request comes from the client, the service method processes the request. So there is a chance of coming many requests from the client. You are not the only client who are dealing with the servlet. There are hundreds of clients. So many requests may come and go. So all the requests are processed by the service method. So service method, as the diagram indicates, you observe the arrow. The arrow indicates that service method is executed again and again. As and when a request comes, the service method executes. So service method is executed again and again for processing of hundreds of requests. After all requests get processed, then finally the operations is over and the servlet gets destroyed. Then destroy method is called. So these are the five life cycle methods. These methods are called as life cycle methods. So every servlet has its own life cycle, and this is the basic architecture on the basis of which the servlet is designed and it is. Then another important thing is, as you know, in a web application, the primary part of web application is communication. And communication is handled by HTTP protocol. HTTP protocol is the carrier. It carries the request from client to the server. It also carries the response from server to the client. HTTP protocol has its own way of carrying the request and response. HTTP protocol has its own way of carrying the request and response. The way of carrying the request and response, these are called as HTTP methods. HTTP methods are not same as Java methods. Java methods are different. Init method, servlet has three methods. Init method, service method, destroy method. These methods are different. These are all Java methods that you need to define within a program. Those methods are different concepts. HTTP methods are completely different. HTTP method is the way of carrying the message. This is not like init service or destroy method. These methods are not like Java methods. So HTTP method is the way of carrying the request and response. There are many HTTP methods: get, post, put, patch, delete, head options. These are all different HTTP methods. And these methods are different ways of carrying the request response between client and server. Among these methods, you need to study all these methods. You need to make self-study. What is get method? What is post method? What is put? What is delete? All those things. Most prominent among these methods, most frequently used methods are get and post. Get and post. Get is a way of carrying the request from client to server. Post is another way of carrying the request from client to server. One example is given below. In this particular slide, example is given below. The example of get method. How get method is used? In your browser, there is a address bar. You must be knowing where exactly the address bar is located. In the address bar, you type this one, get /student zone /hall ticket .jsp, then space http/1.1. What does it mean? When you mention this phrase within the address bar, then this will frame a request and this will go to the server. In this particular phrase, this is called as a UR, uniform resource locator, URL. In this particular URL, student zone is the name of the web server. In this particular example, the name of the server is student zone. Within this server, there is a servlet that is hall ticket.jsp. This is not exactly a servlet, this is a JSP page. We shall discuss what a JSP page is and what is the role of JSP page. Actually, JSP page is converted into servlet. Initially, there is no JSP page internally. Within the servlet container, there is no JSP. We can send request either in the form of a servlet or in the form of a JSP. But internally, JSP is converted into servlet. Finally, JSP gets converted into servlet. So this is a JSP page. When it reaches the servlet container, it is translated into servlet. So student zone is the server. Hall ticket.jsp is the servlet. Then HTTP is the protocol that will carry our request. 1.1 is the version of the protocol. And GET is the way, the method of taking our request to the server. Method of carrying our request to the server. So this is the meaning of this way of sending request using the GET method. So there are two prominent methods. One is GET method, another is POST method. So this slide depicts the major differences between GET and POST. To try to understand this. Whether the request is bookmarked or not, whether the request is cached or not, whether the request stays in the history or not, whether the request is visible to the user or not, whether the request can be used again and again or not, same request. What are the masking type? When the request goes from client to the server, what mask is used? What is the limitation of the request? How much data we can send within the request? Is there any limitations or not? What type of data can be sent? as request. When the request goes from client to server, to what extent it is secure. So these are the different parameters. On the basis of these parameters, we can compare get and post. Both have its own advantages, both have its own disadvantages also. No one is more advantageous than the other. Both have its advantages as well as disadvantages. But these are the parameters on the basis of which we can compare get and post. Basically, which one is more secure? Because security is a major concern. In a web-based application, security is the major concern. During communication, in between communication, if the information gets hijacked by somebody, then it is less secure. No security is there. So security is a major concern. As a customer, I want to know my account balance. When this information is communicated between me and the bank's application, so in between the communication, there must be a security mechanism. Otherwise, my information may be known to others. So as far as these two are concerned, as far as the security of these two methods are concerned, get is less secure and post is more secure. Adopt post method, it is more secure. When we adopt get method, it is less secure. The reason is very, it is obvious that get is less secure because in the when communication takes place, everything is open. Hallticket.jsp. Anybody can open that file, hallticket.jsp. And that is communicated through the address bar of the client. That is visible to everybody. If it is visible to everybody, obviously it is less secure. So get is less secure than the post. Post is more secure. Encoding pattern. What encoding pattern is used? What masking pattern is used? So both the methods uses masking pattern, but which one is, if it is less secured, it is less secured, that means there is a weak masking pattern. So these are the parameters on the basis of which we can use get and post. But these two methods are most prominently used for the purpose of making communication between client and server. So in this presentation itself, we know what a Java servlet is, what is the architecture of Java servlet, what is the life cycle of Java servlet, and what is the characteristics of HTTP protocol to which the communication takes place. Finally, this is an example of servlet, how a servlet gets created. It's a very simpler example of servlet, how a servlet is created. First of all, we need to import these packages. These packages belong to Java library. Need to perform input output operations. Something is to be visible over the presentation layer to the customer. When information response is sent back to the customer, it is visible over the presentation layer. That's why IO, input output operations. Then java.util. Util is a utility package. So these packages needs to be imported. Class servlet. For a simpler example, this is when class gets extended. This is a case of inheritance. So here the superclass is HTTP servlet. HTTP servlet is a superclass that belongs to the javax.servlet.http package. So that superclass gets extended here. So welcome servlet extends HTTP servlet. This is our servlet class. This class contains one method, that is doGet. Public void doGet. It uses two parameters, request parameter and response parameter. It throws two exceptions, IO exceptions and servlet exception. These are the fundamental concepts of Java programming language. You must be knowing all those concepts. How a method throws exceptions, when exceptions are thrown, how they are handled. If you do not handle the exceptions, what will happen to the program? All those things are very fundamental concepts that you must be knowing. So public void doGet. doGet is a Java method, not HTTP method. HTTP methods are different from Java methods. Here we are using a Java method, that is doGet. doGet method corresponds to the HTTP method of get, the way of sending the request. So this request can be sent using the get method of HTTP. So print writer is a class that will be responsible for generating the response. Print writer out is equal to response.getWriter. Now output stream is created. Here out is known as output stream object. So output stream is created. Using that output stream, we need to display the information at the presentation layer. The information which is to be displayed as the presentation layer is in the form of a HTML file. So out.println HTML, out.println head, out.println out.println body content welcome to IGNOU family. So out is the output stream object that we have created over print writer using the print writer. All those information at the presentation layer. So this will go as a response to the client. So this is a very simple example of servlet. So there are two objects. The servlet uses two objects. One is request object, another is response object. These two objects are created as the parameter of the doGet method. Using request object, it receives the request from the client. Using response object, it creates the response and sends the response back to the client. How response is generated and sent back, that is defined within the doGet method. Using the println, out.println. So this is an example servlet. So primarily today we discussed the concepts like J2EE, what J2EE is, what are the characteristics of J2EE, what services J2EE provides, what is the architecture of J2EE, what is the model on the basis of which J2EE works, what is request response model, how request model performs its operations, What is the protocol, communication protocol that is implemented in a request response model? What is the architecture of HTTP protocol? What are the functionalities of HTTP protocol? And finally, what a servlet is that forms the heart of the web application, that deals with everything in a web application. That is servlet. In the next session, we shall discuss other counterparts of the servlet. Like servlets, there is also a technology which is called as JSP. There is also another technology, enterprise Java Beans. All those components can be used in association with servlets to deal with the request and response. In the next session, we shall discuss all those things. I hope what I am saying from here are